From the CISO series, it's Cybersecurity Headlines.
Will the NSA be allowed to cyber hunt domestically? Blockchain and crypto making news with COVID and PayPal. And are we starting to assess the quality of ransomware pirates by their tech support? These are just three of the stories that my colleagues and I brought to you this week on the daily editions of the Cybersecurity Headlines podcast. And now we're getting a chance to get some insight and some opinion and some expertise on these stories from our guest this week, who is James Dolph, CISO of Guidewire Software. So, James, welcome to the show.
Me. Much appreciated.
It's great to see you, and it's a busy week as it always is. And just wanted to, just before we get into the stories here, just wanted to remind everybody that our sponsor for this week is Remediant, and I'll be talking about them shortly. And if you are joining us live, I invite you, if you haven't already, to join on Crowdcast, where you can share some comments and we can read them as we go along. So we have just 20 minutes to cover about 10 stories if we can here. And number one is going to be about U.S. Senators who are offering to let the NSA now hunt cyber actors inside the U.S. It's a bipartisan group of senators, actually, who basically following on from Microsoft Exchange and servers and SolarWinds problems, are now looking to let the NSA do this. And General Paul Nakasone is the one who's been taking the lead on this because these hackers are, quote, no longer launching from different parts of the world. They understand they can come into the United States and do it from there, which is a blind spot for us. So I guess my question is, do you see this as a good development in terms of its scope?
So, I'm of two minds about this. On the one hand, we look at SolarWinds, and I think we can all get behind the fact that the federal government needs to protect the interests of the U.S. and that there's this unprecedented level of attacks that are happening. On the other hand, you've got the Fourth Amendment, you've got privacy concerns of the citizens. And I think in this case, the right things are happening. This is a discussion right now. There's no specific proposal. I think it should continue to be discussed, get in all the right stakeholders, from folks that may represent the side of privacy, also national security folks. And I think we'll get to the right balance.
Good. It's I guess a part of a sort of a learning curve as we all go through it. So yeah, looking for a right balance would be a great way to pursue that. So going to the next story here. This is a great company brand name and a very interesting approach here. FatFace, which is a retailer in the UK, basically got hit with ransomware. And they, first of all, asked their customers to keep the attack strictly private and confidential. And they paid a $2 million ransom to a gang called Conti. And the gang initially demanded $8 million ransom based on what they assessed FatFace's insurance would cover. But then the company talked them down, citing tumbling revenues from COVID. But then, as they took that ransom, the reduced amount, they received some welcome guidance from Conti about how to harden their defenses against future attacks. So the ransomware pirates basically gave them some tech support on the way out the door. So it sounds like a cute story, but I guess the question is, is ransomware now becoming a business, something that is just a fact of life in the corporate world?
I think this is super interesting. First of all, I think it's really hard to hear when this happens. My heart goes out to folks at FatFace. Is it becoming a business? It's already a business. I had a conversation with a former law enforcement official yesterday talking about the ecosystems around ransomware and some threat intelligence. And there are folks that focus on the finance. They focus on the exploits. They focus on the orchestration. It's getting very specialized. So presumably you could become like a criminal VC for cybercrime, and apparently tech support people as well.
Yeah, okay, so we'll go to business school to do that. I mean, not being sarcastic, because this seems to be part of the realities now, absolutely. But it's just one of those things that doesn't really come across the C-suite table very much, to my knowledge anyway. So interesting, good on you, FatFace. At least you were able to bargain this down and get some good support in the meantime. So over on this side of the Atlantic, New Yorkers will now be able to pull up a code on their cell phone to prove that they have been vaccinated against COVID-19 or recently tested negative for the virus. It's called the Excelsior Pass, and what it's going to do apparently is to allow people to go into places like Madison Square Gardens and other big public events maybe even weddings and catered events as well. But my reason for keeping this one on our collection today is that the data is going to come from the state's vaccine registry, but is coming through IBM's Digital Health Pass platform, which is provided via blockchain technology. So neither IBM nor anybody else will have access to the information. So to me, this looks like a good example of the legitimization of blockchain. And I was just wondering, James, what your thought is about blockchain as a technology moving into our corporate and business sphere.
Well, so normally when I hear the word blockchain as a solution, it's something my eyes roll so hard that you can hear it across the room. But I think, like you said, in this case, I think it is an interesting use of the tech. I'm not sure if they need all the aspects of blockchain. You know, it's notoriously resource intensive, and maybe this is the right investment for it. But certainly the cryptographic ledger, that's good for something where you need high assurance to make sure that it's not tampered. And you know, hopefully this helps people in New York to get back to a normal way of life that we all remember from the past.
It seems like it could be possible. I mean, that is the nature of what blockchain is supposed to be, is an immutable record. So hopefully we're able to use this and perhaps even, you know, legitimize it a bit more for other areas. So
yeah,
we'll have to see how that goes. But again, optimistic news.
Pretty cool.
That way, absolutely. Fantastic. So number 4, we have here emails from DHS officials that were obtained in the SolarWinds hack. Sources are saying that this was part of the supply chain attack. The threat actors obtained access to email accounts belonging to the Trump administration's head of Department of Homeland Security, Chad Wolf, and other members of the cybersecurity staff. So the intelligence value of these emails is unknown, but and they switched over to clean phones right afterwards and starting to use Signal as one of their messaging apps. But my question or concern, I think, with regards to this is thinking back some of the visions or images of the January 6th occupation. The people who had gone into, let's say, Nancy Pelosi's office, there was unguarded computers. There was stuff left open. It wasn't like to my knowledge anyway, any sort of major shutdown. Do you know much about that, or do you know like what knowledge we should be given about these kinds of open-ended discoveries of security breaches or leaks?
Yeah, I mean, anything like this, nothing good can come of it. That information is going to be useful to attackers. In this case, I think, you know, when you're talking about state-sponsored, you know, the motivation is generally to sow seeds of doubt in our institutions. And, you know, these threat actors have really given a great go at that. And, you know, the doubt, I think, is something that's a real bad side effect. But it sounds like, you know, there's some stomach to actually really give this a good go to make things better. And I read all the way through the article. And if you look at the very last line in the article, the best thing about the article is it ends with cybersecurity is a top priority, which is like magic words for security people. You know, we'd love to hear that. I think if they can put their money where their mouth is with this, I think, you know, something good could come out of it. But you know, generally, the more we learn about this, the more unprecedented it is.
Yeah, totally. Absolutely. It's but yes, absolutely. If they do actually make it a top priority, as they're saying, that is a good thing, a silver lining coming from this. So let's hope so.
Yeah.
So our sponsor this week is Remediant Secure One. And Remediant is a fast-growing Gartner cool vendor focused on the concept of precision privileged access management. And it's the one that the Fortune 500 company calls the world's best protection against major incidents. So Remediant uniquely does these things. It deploys and inventories thousands of privileged accounts in hours. It locks down lateral movement and ransomware spread by removing standing privilege with a single action, and it administers privileges just in time with MFA. So, you know, if you want to learn more about this, just visit remediant.com, that's remediant.com, for more information. So, let's go back now to the next story. Gibberish. There was a discovery just last week of the gibberish that had been found on the U.S. nuclear agency that came from an unattended child, apparently. This was an unintelligible, just a bunch of keyboard tweets on the Twitter account of the U.S. Strategic Command. And it was sent by the youngest child of the agency's Twitter manager. They were working from home, of course, and had left the room for a moment, and the kid came along and just did some bashing on the keyboard, which is kind of cute in its own way. But it's a reminder, of course, that the agency is responsible for safeguarding America's nuclear weapons. So I guess the question here is kind of obvious. You know, is this something that we should be worried about, those lax moments for people of high positions of high influence making simple mistakes like this?
So, I think this is really relatable for anybody who has young children, like how this could happen. And the people are generally quite empathetic to this type of thing.
Mhm.
We're just lucky that it's Twitter. It's not something sensitive. I'm going to presume that they have some separation of duties to, the very sensitive parts of this organization. And at least it wasn't something like a password. And I'm looking at you, Sean Spicer.
Yes, indeed. Maybe it's one of those sort of phew moments because yes, there may be sort of a two-factor authentication within the Twitter chain with these kinds of agencies. But as people have been saying for years, an errant tweet from a very highly influential political source could cause some significant responses around the world before it is caught. So
Yeah.
it's
But-
easy to. Sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, hopefully there's some learnings from this in a very low stakes way. We get to see the cute, gibberish of a kid, but the government gets to learn from something. We learn from all the mistakes that we make.
Well, that's what I'm hoping exactly. Is someone is keeping track of these mistakes and being able to give them the weight that is required to say, hey, wait a second, we've got to just check something else out because the mindset is to often let these things go as a one-off and forget about it. So okay, so hopefully they will take care of that. Now let's talk about Ziggy. Ziggy is a ransomware company that announced its shutdown, and it was voicing concerns about additional law enforcement activity and sharing or showing some guilt for encrypting their victims. The gang has released all of the decryption keys from its victims and has offered to refund the money that they extorted. And in an interview with Bleeping Computer recently, they said they only created the ransomware to generate cash because they live in a, quote, third world country, unquote. Brett Callow, a threat analyst, suggested that this may be because people associated with Emotet and NetWalker recently got nabbed, and so there's cold feet in the black hat industry, perhaps. But my question to you, James, is that Ziggy has posted contact information for victims to receive their ransoms back in Bitcoin. Do you think that's a good thing, a legitimate thing, or?
I mean, if it's true, which I'm skeptical because it's my job, I think it's an interesting development. I think the one thing that it does remind us is that we're dealing with people on the other end of this. And generally, people are rational actors. So again, if it's true, this is somehow in their interest, and it may be reducing their risk. It may be, trying to avoid being caught, as they've seen some other folks get caught doing similar things, or it may be them trying to increase their karma or their humanity or something like that. We have seen a few situations with some of the hospital ransomwares as well too, where the attacker feels bad for the victim. So. We're not dealing with robots. We are dealing with people. So maybe that's how we should approach some of these problems. I don't know. I'm not a hostage negotiator. So.
Yeah, it's very possible. Honor among thieves. I'm just wondering, however, that the other side of that is someone who says, "Oh, isn't that nice? Yeah, here's my Bitcoin wallet." And it becomes once again one of the classic distraction crimes. So that's what worries me is our immediate desire for things to go well with nice people, and sometimes that doesn't necessarily turn out. So while they're doing that, PayPal is announcing, and this is something that, again, I love because it's quite fascinating. PayPal Holdings announced that they are starting to allow U.S. consumers to use their cryptocurrency holdings to pay at millions of its online merchants globally, which could be a significant boost to digital coinage and assets in the economy. Customers who hold Bitcoin, Ether, Bitcoin Cash, and Litecoin in their PayPal digital wallets, to be specific, can do this and make purchases, and there'll be no transaction fee for this. But only one kind of coin can be used for each purchase. So I'm personally in favor of this because I've been following it for years. But I'm just curious, what worries might you express about a rollout like this?
So, personally, I think this is pretty cool. Big company like PayPal embracing cryptocurrency, it adds legitimacy. It also adds a footprint, making it so that you can actually spend Bitcoins in the way that maybe it was originally envisioned. What I haven't figured out is how to feel about this from a security standpoint or from like a consumer protection standpoint. Because let's say, if you use a credit card and you're in the United States, you've got a number of protections, consumer protections, and outside the US, it's less so. But this is a little bit more of the Wild West in terms of consumer protection. So, is it a safe way to go? Does it encourage bad behavior. I haven't figured that out yet, but I think it's a good directional thing, in turning these cryptocurrencies into something that's more legitimate and kind of out of the shadows.
Yeah, absolutely. Out of the shadows. I think it's a growing thing, and we've covered it a few times on the show in the general interest and comfort with the concept behind it. I guess I'm always concerned about the mistakes people can make when they're newbies in this area. Once again, we've got famous stories of people showing their Bitcoin wallet or their QR code on cameras, on TV and stuff, because they don't quite understand how these wallets work. So I'd love to see this develop, and it's great that somebody the size of PayPal is taking it on, but I'm always worried about the innocence of new people trying it out and not fully understanding a technology that has been so hard to either explain or to understand when somebody explains it to you. But I think it's just great that the brand of Bitcoin or cryptocurrency is escaping, coming out from under the umbrella of just being a dark web type operation. So Ubiquiti. Let's talk for a moment about IoT devices. There was a leak, a breach recently with the IoT manufacturer Ubiquiti, and they create routers, network video recorders, security cameras, and so forth. And they had a breach that involved a third-party cloud provider, apparently, that exposed some account credentials. But now Krebs on security is saying that a source who participated in the response to that says that, number one, Ubiquiti massively downplayed the catastrophic nature of this incident to minimize a hit to its stock price, and secondly, that the third-party cloud provider part was a fabrication. There was none. It was a massive, apparently, according to this whistleblower, a massive breach with a lot of customer data at risk all around the world, private people and companies alike. So Krebs on security has the full story, of course, but I guess the concern here is about, once again, a litigation trail or just simply accountability for the truth at the very beginning. So many companies are guilty of this regardless of the industry that they're in, but do you see this as unique, special, or just par for the course?
I mean, again, it's never positive to hear about this type of thing, especially when it has consumer impact. And really to know whether or not this is true, I think you got to have some inside knowledge. But if it is true, I think it's going to spell some challenges for Ubiquiti, both on the legal side, on the credibility that they have with their customers, et cetera, because building trust is really, really hard. And building back trust is much, much harder. And so, they've sort of built a brand and a reputation on security in some way as part of their value proposition. And, any doubt that's introduced there just can't be good for the company. So I think they need to think long and hard about how do they approach this and how do they talk to customers about it and how do they build back stronger. So I really hope it's not true.
I hope so too. And I'm just going to acknowledge that David Peach is saying here that ransomware is an industry. And so going back to Ziggy, he's saying that ransomware is an industry. So some of them may have a refund policy and some integrity. So it's weird and interesting to sort of see that it is being recognized as a kind of a business. That's quite a fascinating concept. So perhaps one of the role models that they may not want to turn to as they start to rebuild their trust might be MobiKwik. Now, I mean, all these stories, they hit the headlines, and we want to justify that they are true and correct, of course. But when it usually gets to Krebs, I kind of like to believe that it's realistic. So MobiKwik is a Indian mobile payments service in India, and it came under fire because it lost 8.2 terabytes of data belonging to millions of its users, 3.5 million users. So this was another major data breach. But what is significant about this one is that, first of all, the breach shows that MobiKwik does not delete card information from its servers, even after a user has removed them, which is probably a breach of regulations anyway. But MobiKwik went on the offensive very quickly, and I have seen this subsequently as well on Twitter, that they are blaming a, quote, media-crazed so-called security researcher, going nuts and crazy to do all this slanderous stuff online. But numerous independent researchers have shown that the breach did occur because they found their own details on the leak site. So again, PR 101, this is not a great approach. What would you give as guidance to a company like this who's trying to struggle to protect their brand?
Yeah, I mean, whether or not this is true, it seems like there's pretty good evidence and the optics are not great. We all face this really asymmetric challenge. And it's really, really important to be humble. None of us have all the answers. And when you're building trust, and when you have trust with customers, as you do with, this is a regulated industry, it's important to share what you know, Sometimes share what you don't know and try to be open and honest about those things. The thing that you really shouldn't do is don't poke the bear, don't insult people, don't tell people that they're wrong. There's enough unpredictability when we're dealing with threat actors, and our interactions with attackers really, they can either make things worse, or sometimes they can make things better. Maybe they're going to give us tech support on how we can fix all of our issues, right?
Yes.
But people get entrenched. Again, there's a human on the other side of this, and if you insult their honor, then it's not going to end well, right? So, a little humility might help in this situation.
Fantastic. Well, we have one last story before we end off here. And this is another scam one I know that is something that's of interest to you here, the Scam iOS stealing Bitcoin. And what this was a Scam iOS app that was imitating the Trezor wallet, stole 17 Bitcoins from an individual's wallet because they basically did a bait and switch. It got through the Apple App Store review process by posing as a cryptography app. And then once it had been approved, they switched it back to a cryptocurrency wallet, which then started stealing money from people. So this is a nasty little piece of work. But again, ingenious for those who have not thought of this particular approach to stealing people's money before. So, what can be done? This is a bait and switch technique. Fascinating in how they did it. But what can be done? What do you think about this, James?
Well, all the incentives are in place with Bitcoin where it is right now. And, I spent a fair amount of time working on marketplace security. And marketplaces have a very hard job because there's no way to determine if functionality is malicious. It's not like finding vulnerabilities. There's no scanner for it, right? For the most part, you can't engineer these problems out. And so, the article talks a lot about how Apple makes these, sort of claims around what they can do. Again, it's a pretty difficult challenge for them to make claims like that. I'm not sure if that's actually happening or if this is sort of the PR side of things. My advice to anybody who uses anything on an app store is just like anything you do on a computer, it's important to be skeptical based on your risk appetite. And for me, if it's money related, and particularly if it's Bitcoin related these days, you may consider going with an established player like I would.
Yep.
So, you can't just trust what's on the app stores. You have to sort of buyer beware in all these cases.
Absolutely. And Jane, we got another comment from David Peach saying that just going back to the breach scenario of the previous couple of stories, actually, how you handle this breach will stick in the collective memory a lot longer than the minutia of the actual cause of the breach. So again, memories, especially bad experiences, last a long time, but good ones do too. So some good lessons that can be learned from this, and also perhaps as well for this iOS switchover story. So, a very good variety of stories this week. My question to you now is, was any one of these your favorite? Any one of these that sticks out as your favorite?
I like this last one because I think the marketplace challenge is a really interesting one for me. And I think that there's something to be learned for almost everybody. It's not like it's happening to a big company. This is something that's happened to individual consumers. Mm-hmm. So I think that's super, super interesting. I think, the last commenter made a really good point. We want to avoid the Streisand effect, bringing more attention to it that it actually needs. So really astute observation. I think people remember if you act with integrity, and people will act if you act with humility. They'll remember those things, and you'll be able to, again, sort of build this intangible, which is trust.
I have a sense this would be a very good case study for business school. How this MobiQuick was handled exactly for those reasons. The large, as Mr. Peach was saying, the larger scale end benefit. So this has been fantastic. I would love to know more about Guidewire Software. Are you guys hiring? How are things going?
Oh man, are we hiring? We're growing like crazy right now. And if you want to be part of the journey that we're on, we would love for you to join us. We just opened up a bunch of brand new roles. And if you're interested, you can check them out at careers.guidewire.com. And a lot of great people on the team. We're doing lots of fun stuff. So we would love for interesting people to join us.
Well, that is fantastic. I really appreciate that. And of course, I really appreciate you being with us this evening for this. And then another very busy week. James Duff, CISO at Guidewire Software. It's been an absolute treat. Thank you so much for being here. And I hope to talk to you again soon.
Likewise, and my pleasure.
Okay. So here we are. It's just the end of another session. And what I want to remind you of as we fade ourselves to black here as well is that if you're interested in learning more about this ever-changing, ever-evolving industry, check out tomorrow our Friday video chat, which is Hacking the IT Security Gap. It starts at 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern. You can go to CISOseries.com and click on the Register for Video Chats button to join us. Thanks to our sponsor this week, Remediant. You can check them out, of course, at remediant.com. And remember, if you want to get more information every single day, a 6-minute podcast, myself and my colleagues will deliver the stuff you need to know every single weekday in our Cybersecurity Headlines podcast. So I will be back next week, and I look forward to seeing you then. Thank you so much for being with us. Take care and stay safe.
Cybersecurity Headlines are available every weekday. Head to CISOseries.com for the full stories behind the headlines.